'Twas the night before Christmas, when all through the house not even a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care, in hopes that Saint Nick soon would be there. The children were nestled all snug in their beds, while visions of sugar plums danced in their heads. And Mamma in her kerchief and I in my cap had settled our brains for a long winter nap. When out in the lawn there arose such a clatter, I sprang from my bed to see what was the matter. Away to the window I flew like a flash, tore open the shutters and threw up the sash. The moon on the breast of the new-fallen snow gave lustre of midday to objects below, when what to my wondering eyes did appear but a miniature sleigh and 8 tiny reindeer, with an old little driver so lively and quick, I knew in a moment he must be Saint Nick. More rapid than eagles his coursers they came, and he whistled and shouted and called by their name. Now Dasher, now Dancer, now Prancer and Vixen, on Comet, on Cupid, on Donner and Blitzen, to the top of the porch, to the top of the wall. Now dash away, dash away, dash away all, as leaves that before the wild hurricane fly, when they meet with an obstacle, mount to the sky. So up to the roof-tops the coursers they flew, with the sleigh full of toys, and St. Nicholas too. And then, in a twinkling, I heard on the roof, as I drew in my head, the prancing and pawing of each little hoof, as I drew in my head and was turning around. Down the chimney St. Nicholas came with a bound. He was dressed in all fur from his head to his foot, and his clothes were all tarnished with ashes and soot. A bundle of toys he'd flung over his back, and as he looked like a peddler just opened his pack. His eyes how they twinkled, his dimples how merry, his cheeks were like roses, his nose like a cherry. His droll little mouth was drawn up like a bow, and the beard on his chin was as white as the snow. The stump of a pipe he held tight in his teeth, and the smoke it circled his head like a wreath. He had a broad face and a little round belly that shook when he laughed like a bowl full of jelly. He was chubby and plump, and a right jolly old elf, and I laughed when I saw him in spite of myself. A wink of his eye and a twist of his head soon gave me to know that I had nothing to dread. He spoke not a word, but went straight to his work, and filled all the stockings, then turned with a jerk, and laying his finger aside on his nose, and giving a nod, up the chimney he rose. He sprang to his sleigh, to his team gave a whistle, and away they all flew, like the down of a thistle. But then I heard him exclaim, ere it drove out of sight, Happy Christmas to all, and to all a good night. That's from Clement Clark Moore. A Christmas classic that I've not read before. And there was a rhyme I not intended to make, but here we are, so here we are. Looks like it's still a bit quiet. Except for Action Shin, which I'm nearly certain isn't a real account. Yeah. I'm fairly sure that that's just a bot of some kind. So, I don't give a care about that. I am here with a little ice cream. Not exactly the snack of the season. But I figured, even though it was a holiday, not everyone has somewhere to go or people to spend it with, especially in these pandemic times. Or who knows? Maybe you're with company who likes spooky stories. Yo, Zerp. Or it could be late as fuck for you. How you doing, dude? I have Christmas-themed stuff today, or winter in general. So, hang in there, little buddy. Just a bit sick. Yeah, so is like half of New York right now. Audible gasp. Yeah, it's... I hope you feel better, dude. You drinking the water? Murder Santa? Oh, fuck yeah. Well, I don't know about Murder Santa specifically, but there's definitely some stuff in here. I bet there's gotta be some Irish stuff with some murder fairies. I forgot to check, but I'd be shocked if there's not. Sorry for the eating. Actually, could pull that out right now. I do have a bunch of stuff, just in general. Fairy, the Irish peasantry, Christmas. There's one mention, there are 4 mentions of Christmas. Oh fuck, here we go. I found one right off the bat. Holy shit. Alright, Zerb. I have no idea what this is, but I'll read it. The faint. Good job, Wolfie. It's word 2, and we're already failing. The Fate of Frank McKenna. 139, The Fate of Frank McKenna. Okay, book. By William Carleton, ? There lived a man named McKenna at the hip of one of the mountain hills which divide the country of Tyrone from that of Monaghan. This McKenna had 2 sons, one of whom was in the habit of tracing hares of a Sunday whenever there happened to be a fall of snow. His father, it seems, had remonstrated him with... What? His father, it seems, had frequently remonstrated him upon what he considered to be a violation of the Lord's Day, as well as for his general neglect of Mass. The young man, however, though otherwise harmless and inoffensive, was in this manner quite insensible to the paternal reproof, and continued to trace whenever the avocations of labour would allow him. It so happened that upon a Christmas morning, I think the year 1814, there was a deep fall of snow, and young McKenna, instead of going to Mass, got down his cockstick, which is a staff much thicker and heavier on one end than the other. I'm trying not to be 12. Come on, Wolfie, you could do it. Don't laugh at Cockstick. Fuck. Oh, well. Fuck. No. I'm 20 fucking 5. Come on, man. Oh, no. Oh. Staff much thicker and heavier at one end than at the other, and prepared to set out on his favourite amusement. His father, seeing this, reproved him seriously, and insisted that he should attend prayers. His enthusiasm for the sport, however, was stronger than his love of religion, or hard to relate, and he refused to be guided by his father's advice. The old man, during the altercation, got warm, and on finding his son obstinately scorned his authority, he knelt down and prayed that if the boy persisted in his following his own will, he might never return from the mountains unless as a corpse. Fuck, dude. The imprecation, which was certainly as harsh as it was impious and senseless, might have startled many a mind, from a purpose that was, to say the least of it, at variance with religion and respect due to a father. It had no effect, however, upon the son, who is said to have replied that whether he returned or not, he was determined on going, and accordingly he did. 'Twas not, however, alone, for peers that 3 or 4 of the neighbouring young men accompanied him. Whether their sport was good or otherwise is not the purpose, and neither am I to say, but the story goes that the latter part of the day they started a long and darker hare. Whoa, brain? Whether their sport was good or otherwise is not to the purpose, neither am I able to say, but the story goes on that toward the latter part of the day they started a larger and darker hare than any they had ever seen, and she kept dodging on before them bit by bit, leading them to suppose that every succeeding cast of the cockstick would bring her down. It was... No. Come on, we did this already. Move on. Come on. Oh, the friggin' giggle bunnies. Cockstick would bring her down. It was observed afterwards that she led them into the recesses of the mountains, and although they tried to turn her course homewards, they could not succeed in doing so. As the evening advanced, the companions of McKenna began to feel the folly of pursuing her farther, and to perceive the danger of losing their way in the mountains, should night or snowstorm come upon them. They therefore proposed to give over the chase and return home, but McKenna would not hear it. "If you wish to go home, you may," said he. "As for me, 'til never leave this hills till I have her with me." They begged and entreated him. No, I was right. They begged and entreated him to desist and return, but all to no purpose. He appeared to be what the Scotch call 7 to the 7th power. Squint? That is, to act as if he was moved by some impulse that leads to death, and from the influence of which man cannot withdraw himself. At length, on finding him invincibly obstinate, they left him, pursuing the hare directly into the heart of the mountains, and returned to their respective homes. In the meantime, one of the most terrible snowstorms ever remembered in that part of the country came on, and the consequence was that a self-willed young man, who had equally trampled on the sanctities of religion and paternal authority, was given over for lost. As soon as the tempest became still, the neighbours assembled in a body and proceeded to look for him. The snow, however, had fallen so heavily that not a single mark of a footstep could be seen. Nothing but one wide waste of white, undulating hills met the eye wherever it was turned, Anna McKenna. No trace whatever was visible or could be found. His father now remembered the unnatural character of his imprecation, was nearly distracted, for although the body had not yet been found, still by everyone who had witnessed the sudden rage of the storm, and who knew the mountains, escape or survival was felt to be impossible. Every day for about a week, large parties were out among the hill ranges seeking him, but to no purpose. At length there came a thaw, and his body was found, on a snow wreath, lying on a supine posture within a circle which he had drawn around himself with his cockstick. His prayer book lay open upon his mouth, and his hat was pulled down as to cover it in his face. It's unnecessary to say that the rumour of his death and the circumstances under which he had left home created the most extraordinary sensation in the country. A sensation that was greater in proportion to the uncertainty occasioned by not having been found either alive or dead. Some affirmed that he had crossed the mountains and was seen in Monaghan. Others that he had been seen in Clones, in Amieville, in 5 Mile Town. But despite all these agreeable reports, the melancholy truth was at length made clear by the appearance of the body as just stated. Now it so happened that the house nearest the spot where he lay was inhabited by a man named Daly, I think, but the name I'm not certain, who was a herd or a caretaker to Dr. Porter, then Bishop of Clogher. The situation of this house was the most lonely and desolate looking that could be imagined. It was at least 2 miles distant from any human habitation, being surrounded by one wide and dreary waste of dark moor. By this house lay the route of those who had found the corpse, and I believe the door of it was borrowed for the purpose of conveying it home. Be it as it may, the family witnessed the melancholy procession as it passed slowly through the mountains, and when the place and circumstances are all considered, we may admit to ignorant and superstitious people, whose minds, even upon ordinary circumstances, were strongly affected by such matters, it was a slight calculated to leave behind it a deep, if not terrible, impression. Time soon proved that it did so. An incident is said to have occurred at the funeral in fine keeping with the wild spirit of the melancholy event. When the procession had advanced to a place called, I'm gonna try to pronounce that, to a place called Muugahini, maybe, a dark, large-coloured hare, which was instantly recognized by those who had been out with him on the hills, as the identical one who had led him to his fate, is said to have crossed the roads about 20 yards or so before the coffin. The story goes that a man struck it on the side with a stone, and that the blow, which could have killed an ordinary hare, not only did it no injury, but occasioned a sound to proceed from the body resembling a hollow one emitted by an empty barrel when struck. In the meantime, the interment took place, and the sensation began, like every other, to die away in the natural process of time, when, behold, a report ran around like wildfire, that, to use the language of the people, Frank McKenna was appearing. One night, about a fortnight after his funeral, the daughter of Daly, the herd, a girl about 14, while lying in her bed, saw what appeared to be the likeness of McKenna, who had been lost. She screamed out, and covering her head with her bedclothes, told her father and mother that Frank McKenna was in the house. This alarming intelligence naturally produced great terror. Still, Daly, who, notwithstanding his belief in such matters, possessed a good deal of moral courage, was cool enough to rise and examine the house, which consisted only of one apartment. This gave the daughter some courage, who, on finding that her father could not see him, ventured to look out, and then she could see nothing of him herself. She soon fell asleep, and her father attributed what she saw to fear, or some accidental combination of shadows proceeding from the furniture, for it was a clear moonlight night. The light of the following day dispelled a great deal on their apprehensions, and comparatively little was thought of it until evening again advanced, and the fears of the daughter began to return. They appeared to be prophetic, for she said when the night came that she knew he would appear again, and accordingly, at the same hour he did so. This was repeated several successive nights, until the girl, for the very hardihood of terror, became so far familiarized. What the familiarized? Familiarized? Was that supposed to be familiarized? Oh dear. Well, this was clearly scanned in. The girl, from the very hardihood of terror, became so familiarized to the spectre as to venture to address it. "In the name of God," she asked, "what is troubling you? Or why do you appear to me instead of some of your own family or relations?" The ghost's answer alone might settle the question involved in the authenticity of its appearance, being as it was an account of the most ludicrous missions that ever a spirit was dispatched on. "I'm not allowed," said he, "to speak to any of my friends, for I parted with them in anger. But I'll come to tell you that they're quarrelling about my breeches, a new pair that I got made for Christmas Day, and as I was coming up to Thrace in the mountains, I thought that old one could do with better, and of course I didn't put the new pair on me. A reason for appearing," he added, "is that you may tell my friends that none of 'em is to wear 'em. They must be given to charity." The serious and solemn intimation from the ghost was duly communicated to the family. And it was found that the circumstances were exactly as it had been represented to them. This, of course, was considered as sufficient proof of the truth of its mission. Their conversations now became not only frequent, but quite friendly and familiar. The girl became a favourite with the spectre, and the spectre, on the other hand, soon all lost his terror in their eyes. He told her that whilst his friends were bearing home on his body, the handspikes or poles on which they carried him had cut his back, and occasioned him great pain. The cutting of the back was also known to be true, and strengthened, of course, the truth and authenticity of their dialogues. The whole neighbourhood was now in a commotion with the story of the apparition, and persons, incited by curiosity, began to visit the girl, in order to satisfy themselves of the truth in what they had heard. Everything, however, was corroborated, and the child herself, without symptoms of anxiety or terror, artlessly related her conversations with the spirit. Hitherto their interviews had been all nocturnal, but now the ghost found his footing made good, put a hearty face on, and ventured to appear by daylight. The girl also fell into states of syncope? I'm googling that word. Oh, temporary loss of consciousness caused by a fall in blood pressure. Okay. And while the fits lasted, long conversations with him upon the subject of God, the Blessed Virgin, and heaven took place between them. He was certainly an excellent moralist, and gave the best advice. Swearing, drunkenness, theft, and every evil propensity of our nature was declaimed against with a degree of spectral eloquence quite surprising. Common fame had now a topic dear to her heart, and never was a ghost made more of by his best friends than she made of him. The whole country was in a tumult, and I well remember now the crowds which flocked to the lonely little cabin in the mountains, now the scene of matters so interesting and important. Not a single day passed in which I should think from 10 to 20, 30, or 50 persons were not present at these singular interviews. Nothing else was talked of, thought of, and, as well as I can testify, dreamt of. I would have myself gone to Dahlia's, were not for a confounded misgiving I had, that perhaps the ghost might take a fancy of appearing to me, as he had taken to cultivate an intimacy with a girl. And so it happens, when I see the face of an individual nailed down in the coffin, chilling and gloomy operation, I experience no particular wish to look upon it again. The spot where the body of McKenna was found is now marked by a little heap of stones, which has been collected since the melancholy event of his death. Every person who passes it throws a stone upon the heap. Why this old custom is practiced, or what it means, I do not know, unless it be simply to mark the spot as a visible means of preserving the memory of the occurrence. Dahlia's house, the scene of supposed apparition, is now in shapeless ruin, which could scarcely be seen were it not for the green spot that once was a garden, which now shines at a distance like an emerald, but with no agreeable or pleasing associations. It is a spot where no solitary schoolboy will ever visit, nor indeed would the unflinching believer in popular nonsense of ghosts wish to pass it without a companion. It is, under any circumstances, a gloomy and barren place. When looked upon in connection with what I have just recited, it is lonely, desolate, and awful. So that's one mention of Christmas. Hopefully that was good. Don't go chasing bunnies on Christmas, is essentially the moral of that story. Hold on, I'm just gonna finish this snack. I wonder if there's any more references to Christmas in any of these Irish ones. Here, I'll do a quick Control F. Oh, not in this one. Man, True Irish ghost stories. Oh, I don't even know where this starts and where this ends. Alright. Put a cork in it for now. Let me go to Charles Dickens apparently had ghost stories. This one is called A Christmas Carol. Hopefully it's not long as fuck, but it might be. Stave 1, Marley's Ghost. Marley was dead to begin with. There's no doubt whatever about that. The register of his burial was signed by the clergyman, the clerk, the undertaker, and the chief mourner. Scrooge signed it, and Scrooge's name was good upon change, for anything he chose to put his hand to. Old Marley was dead as a doornail. Mind, I don't mean to say that I know, of my own knowledge, what there is particularly dead about a doornail. I might have been inclined, myself, to regard a coffin nail as the deadest piece of ironmongery in the trade, but the wisdom of our ancestors is in the simile, and my unhallowed hands shall not disturb it, or the country's done for. You'll therefore permit me to repeat emphatically that Marley was dead as a doornail. Scrooge knew he was dead, of course he did. How could it be otherwise? Scrooge and he were partners for I don't know how many years. Scrooge was his sole executor, his sole administrator, his sole assign, his sole residuary legatee, his sole friend and sole mourner. And even Scrooge was not so dreadfully cut up by the sad event, but that he was an excellent man of business on the very day of the funeral, and solemnized it with undoubted bargain. The mention of Marley's funeral brings me back to the point I started from. There is no doubt that Marley was dead. This must be distinctly understood, or nothing wonderful can come from the story that I am going to relate, if it were not perfectly convinced that Hamlet's father died before the play began. There would be nothing more remarkable in his taking a stroll at night in an easterly wind upon his own ramparts than there would be in any other middle-aged gentleman rashly turning out after dark in a breezy spot, say St. Paul's churchyard for instance, literally to astonish his son's weak mind. Scrooge never painted out old Molly's name. There it stood years afterward, above the warehouse door, Scrooge and Marley. For the firm was known as Scrooge and Marley. Sometimes people new to the business called Scrooge, and sometimes Marley. But he answered to both names. It was all the same to him. Oh, but he was a tight-fisted hand at the grindstone, Scrooge. A squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner, hard and sharp as a flint, from which no steel had ever struck out generous fire. Secret and self-contained, and solitary as an oyster. His cold within him froze his old features, nipped his pointed nose, shrivelled his cheek, and stiffened his gait, made his eyes red, his thin lips blue, and spoke shrewdly in his grating voice. A frosty rime was on his head, and on his eyebrows and his wiry chin. I'm Irish again. What the fuck? Alright, Alright, for the sake of the stream, Mr. Charlie Dickens was Irish. Zerp, you cool with that? Are you cool with an Irish Charles Dickens? I'm gonna assume you say yes. For you might have fallen asleep. Ye? Okay, good. Wiry chin. He carried on his low temperature always about him. He iced his office in the dog days, and didn't thaw it out 1 bit degree at Christmas. External heat and cold had little influence on Scrooge. No warmth could warm, no wintry weather could chill him. No wind that blew was bitterer than he, no fallen snow was more intent upon its purpose. No pelting rain less open to entreaty. Foul weather didn't know where to have him. The heaviest rain and snow and hail and sleet could boast of the advantage over him in only one respect. It often came down handsomely, and Scrooge never did. No one ever stopped him in the street to say with gladsome looks, "My dear Scrooge, how are you? When will you come to see me?" No beggars implored him to bestow a trifle, no children asked him what it was o'clock. No man or woman ever once in all his life inquired the way to such and such place of Scrooge. Even the blind men's dogs appeared to know him. When they saw him coming on, they would tug their owners into doorways and up courts, and they would wag their tails as though they said, "No eye at all is better than an evil eye, Dockmaster." And what did Scrooge care? It was the very thing he liked, to edge his way along the crowded paths of life, warning all human sympathy to keep its distance. Was what the knowing ones call nuts to Scrooge. Once upon a time, in the good days of the year, on Christmas Eve, old Scrooge sat busy in his counting-house. 'Twas dark, bleak, biting weather, foggy withal, and he could hear the people in the court outside go wheezing up and down, beating their hands upon their breasts and stamping their feet upon the pavements to warm them. The city clocks had only just gone 3, but it was quite dark already. It had not been light all day, and the candles were flaring in the windows of the neighbouring offices, like ruddy smears upon the palpable brown air. The fog came pouring at every chink and keyhole. It was so dense without that although the court was the narrowest, and the houses opposite mere fountains, to see the dingy cloud came drooping down, obscuring everything, one might have thought that nature lived hard by, and was brewing on a large scale. The door of Scrooge's counting-house was open that he might keep his eye on the clerk, who in a dismal little cell beyond, a sort of tank, was copying letters. Scrooge had a very small fire, But the clerk's fire was so much very smaller that it looked like one coal. But he couldn't replenish it, for Scrooge kept the coal box in his own room. And surely as the clerk came in with the shovel, the master predicted it would be necessary for them to part. Wherefore the clerk put on his white comforter and tried to warm himself with a candle, in which effort, not being a man of strong imagination, he failed. "A Merry Christmas, Uncle, God save ye!" cried a cheerful voice. 'Twas the voice of Scrooge's nephew, who came upon him so quickly that this was the first intimation of that he had of the who came upon him so quickly that this was the first intimation he had of his approach. "Bah!" said Scrooge. "Humbug!" "Oh, it's this story! Oh, I've never actually read this story. I don't actually know this story." "Oh, word, it's this story." "Oh, wouldn't you know it?" Sweet. He had so seated himself, with rapid walking in the fog and frost. This nephew was Scrooge's. He was all in a glow. His face was ruddy and handsome, his eyes sparkled, and his breath smoked again. "Christmas a humbug, Uncle," said Scrooge's nephew. "You don't mean that, I'm sure." "I do," said Scrooge. "Merry Christmas. What right have you to be merry? What reason have you to be merry? You're poor enough." "Come then," returned the nephew gaily. "What right have you to be dismal? What right have you to be morose? You're rich enough." Scrooge, having no better answer, ready on the spur of the moment, said "Bah!" again, and followed it up with "Humbug!" "Oh, don't be cross, Uncle," said the nephew. "What else can I be?" I'm just butchering all the voices. We'll just see where this goes. "What else can I be?" returned the uncle. Explodes through the wall. Happy holidays. Yo, Chaos. We're apparently reading A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. In all the worst voices. I tried to start off British, but I drifted back to Irish. And now Scrooge is a truck driver. How are you doing, dude? I'm happy to see you. Oh, it's good to see you, dude. Oh, God. "What else can I be?" replied the uncle, "when I live in such a world of fools as this? Merry Christmas! Out upon Merry Christmas! What Christmas time to you but a time for paying bills without money? A time for finding yourself a year older but not an hour richer? A time for balancing your books and having every item in 'em through around a dozen a months presented dead against you? If I could work my will," said Scrooge indignantly, who might be southern, "every idiot who goes about with 'Merry Christmas' on his lips should be boiled with his own pudding and buried with a stake of holly through his heart, he should." I'm doing good. Christmas Carol. Will Kermit show up? I mean, I guess I could make the nephew Kermit. "Uncle!" pleaded the nephew. "Nephew!" returned the uncle sternly. "Keep Christmas in your own way, and let me keep it in mine." "Keep it!" repeated fuck me. "Keep it!" repeated Scrooge's nephew. "But you don't keep it." "Let me have it alone, then," said Scrooge. "Much good may it do you? Much good has it ever done you?" "There are many things from which I might have deprived good, by which I have not profited, I dare say," returned the nephew. "Christmas among the rest. But I'm sure I have always thought of Christmas time when it has come around. Apart from the veneration due to its sacred name and origin, if anything belonging to it can be apart from that, as a good time, a kind, forgiving, charitable, pleasant time, the only time I know of in the long calendar of the year, when men and women seem to be..." Squint. when men and women seem by one to consent to open up their shut hearts freely, and to think of people below them as if they were really fellow passengers to the grave, and not another race of creatures beyond bound on their journeys. Oh my lord. And therefore, uncle, though it has never put a scrap of gold or silver in my pocket, I believe that it has done me good, and good it will do me. And I say God bless it. Jesus Christ, I forgot how fucking verbose fucking Dickens was. Was he paid by the word or something? Was he paid by the letter? The clerk in the tank involuntarily applauded. Becoming immediately sensible of the impropriety, he poked the fire and extinguished the last frail spark forever.
"Let me hear another sound from you," said Scrooge, "and you'll keep your Christmas by losing your situation. You're quite a powerful speaker, sir," he added, turning to his nephew. "I wonder if you don't go into Parliament."
"Don't be angry, uncle. Come, dine with us tomorrow." Scrooge said that he would say him yes. Indeed he did. He went the whole length of an expression and said he would see him in that extremity first.
"But why—"
Oh, shit, fuck. "But why?" cried Scrooge's nephew. "Why?"
"Why did you get married?"
said Scrooge. "Because I fell in love."
"Because you fell in love,"
growled Scrooge, as if Oh no. Oh, we're back to cockstick. Oh, come on, Wolf, get a grip.
"Because you fell in love."
It's even funnier with the voice crack. Oh no. Oh.
"Because you fell in love,"
growled Scrooge, as if it was the only one thing in the world more ridiculous than a Merry Christmas.
"Good afternoon."
Nay, uncle, but you never came to see me before that happened. Why give it a reason for not coming now?"
"Good afternoon,"
said Scrooge. "I want nothing from you. I ask nothing of you. Why can't we be friends?"
"Good afternoon,"
said Scrooge. "I'm sorry with all my heart to find you so resolute. We've never had any quarrels, to which I've been a party, but I have made it the trial and homage to Christmas, and I'll keep my Christmas humor till the last. And so a Merry Christmas, uncle."
"Good afternoon,"
said Scrooge. "And a Happy New Year."
"Good afternoon,"
said Scrooge. His nephew left the room without an angry word notwithstanding. He stopped at the outer door to bestow the greetings of the season upon the clerk, who, cold as he was warmer than Scrooge, for he returned them cordially.
"There's another fellow,"
muttered Scrooge, who overheard him.
"My clerk with 15 shillings a week, and a wife and family, talking about Merry Christmas. I'll be tired of Bedlam."
This lunatic, in letting Scrooge's nephew out, had let two other people in. They were portly gentlemen, pleasant to behold, and now stood with their hats off in Scrooge's office. They had books and papers in their hands and bowed to him. Oh God. Are these people also Kermit, chat? Alright. They're out of voice you want me to give these guys. We're making this shit interactive. Do-do-do. Do-do-do-do-do-do. Do-do-do-do-do. You-do-do-do-do-do-do-do. Do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do. Make them New Yorkers? Alright, I got this. I got this. Scrooge and Molly's, I believe, said one of the gentlemen, referring to his list. Have I the pleasure of addressing Mr. Scrooge and Mr. Molly?
Mr. Marley has been dead these 7 years,
Scrooge replied.
He died 7 years ago this very night.
We have no doubt in his liberality. He is well represented by his surviving partner, said the gentleman, presenting his credentials. It certainly was, for they had been two kindred spirits. At the ominous word for liberality, Scrooge frowned and shook his head, and handed the credentials back. At this festive time of year, Mr. Scrooge, said the gentleman, taking up a pen, it is more than usually desirable that we should make some slight provision for the poor and destitute, who suffer greatly at this present time. Many thousands are in want of common necessities, hundreds and thousands are wanting in common comforts, sir.
Are there no prisons?
Asked Scrooge. Plenty of prisons, said the gentleman, laying down the pen again.
And the union workhouses?
Demanded Scrooge.
Are they still in operation?
They are, still, returned the gentleman. I wish I could say they were not.
The treadmill and the poor law in full vigor, then?
Said Scrooge. Both very busy, sir.
Oh, I was afraid from what you said at first that something had occurred to stop them in their useful course, said Scrooge. I'm very glad to hear it.
Oh, there we go, the Southern came back. Under the impression that Under the impression that they scarcely furnish Christian cheer, mind the body, the multitude, returned the gentleman. A few of us are endeavoring to raise a fund to buy the poor some meat and drink and means of warmth. We chose this time because it's the time of all others when want is keenly felt and abundance rejoices. What shall I put you down for, huh?
Nothing,
Scrooge replied. You wish to be anonymous?
I wish to be left alone, said Scrooge. Since you ask me what I wish, gentlemen, that is my answer. I don't make merry myself at Christmas, and I can't afford to make idle people merry. I help to support the establishments I've mentioned. They cost enough, and those who are badly off may go there.
Many can't go there, and many would rather die.
If they would rather die,
said Scrooge,
they better do it, and decrease the surplus population. Besides, excuse me, I don't know that.
But you might know it, observed the gentleman.
It's not my business, Scrooge returned. It's enough for a man to understand his own business, and not to interfere.
Oh, Chad, I haven't even taken any medication.
It's enough for a man to understand his own business and not to interfere with other people's. Mine occupies me constantly. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Seeing clearly that it would be useless to pursue their point, the gentleman withdrew. Scrooge returned to his labours with an improved opinion of himself, and in a more facetious temper than was usual with him. Meanwhile, the fog and darkness thickened so that people ran about with flaring links, proffering their services to go before horses and carriages and conduct them on their way. The ancient tower of a church, whose gruff old bell was always peeping silly down at Scrooge out of the Gothic window in the wall, became invisible and struck the hours and quarters and clouds with a tumultuous... I made that fucking word up. With tremulous vibrations afterwards, as if teeth were chattering in its frozen head up there. The cold became intense. In the main street at the corner of the court, Some labourers were repairing the gas pipes and lighted a fire in a brazier. Is it brazier or brazier? I don't know. Round which a party of ragged men and boys were gathered, warming their hands and winking their eyes before the blaze in rapture. The water plug being left in solitude, its overflowing, sullenly congealed, and turned into misanthropic ice. The brightness of the shops where holly sprigs and berries crackled in the lamp heat of the windows made pale faces ruddy as they passed. Poultiers and grocers' trades became a splendid joke, a glorious pageant, with which it was next to impossible to believe that such dull principles as bargain and sale had anything to do. The Lord Mayor, in the stronghold of the mighty mansion house, gave orders to his 50 cooks and butlers to keep Christmas as the Lord Mayor's household should, and even the little tailor, whom he had fined 5 shillings on the previous Monday for being drunk and bloodthirsty in the streets. Bloodthirsty in the streets? Wait, let me reserve judgment until I finish the sentence. Yo, Thunder Kitty. And even the little tailor, whom he had fined 5 shillings on the previous Monday for being drunk and bloodthirsty in the streets, stirred up tomorrow's pudding in his garret, while his lean wife and the baby sallied off to buy the beef. I thought he let him go. Okay, that's different. Foggier yet and colder. Piercing, searching, biting cold. If the good Saint Dunstan had but nipped the evil spirit's nose with a touch of such weather as that, instead of using his familiar weapons, then indeed he would have roared to his lusty purpose. The owner of one scant young nose gnawed and mumbled by the hungry cold. Oh my fucking lord. The owner of one scant young... Dickens, I swear to God. The owner of one scant young nose gnawed and mumbled by the hungry cold as bones are gnawed by dogs, stooped down at Scrooge's keyhole to regale him with a Christmas carol, but at the first sound of "God bless you, merry gentlemen, may you nothing dismay," I scrambled the words, but it's fine. Scrooge seized the ruler with such energy of action that the singer fled in terror, leaving the keyhole to the fog and even more congenial frost. At the length of the hour, shutting up in the counting-house arrived. With ill will, Scrooge dismounted from his stool and tacitly admitted the fact to the expectant clerk in the tank, who instantly snuffed his candle out and put on his hat.
"You'll want all day tomorrow, I suppose,"
said Scrooge. I forgot entirely what voice I gave this fucker. "If quite convenient, sir."
"It's not convenient," said Scrooge, "and it's not fair. If I was to stop you half a crown for it, you'd think yourself ill-used, I'll be bound."
The clerk smiled faintly.
"And yet," said Scrooge, "you don't think me ill-used when I pay you a day's wages for no work."
The clerk observed that it was only once a year.
"A poor excuse for picking a man's pocket every 25th of December," said Scrooge, buttoning his greatcoat to the chin. "But I suppose you must have the whole day. Be here all the earlier next morning."
The clerk promised that he would, and Scrooge walked out with a growl. The office was closed in a twinkling, and the clerk, with the long ends of his white comforter dangling below his waist, for he boasted no greatcoat, went down a slide on Cornhill, at the very end of the lane of boys, 20 times in honour of it being Christmas Eve. That's cute as fuck. That's it. Chat, remind me that the clerk is now voiced by Ren. And then ran home to Camden Town, as hard as he could pelt, to play the blind man's buff. Scrooge took his melancholy dinner in his usual melancholy tavern, and having read all the newspapers and beguiled the rest of the evening with banker's book, went home to bed. He lived in chambers which had once belonged to his deceased partner. They were gloomy suite of rooms, and though he Ah! Holy shit, why do I have 7 viewers? Holy fuck, the gang's all here. Jesus, okay. He lived in his chambers, which had once belonged to his deceased partner. They were a gloomy suite of rooms in the lowering pile of a building up a yard, where it had so little business to be that one could scarcely help fancying it must have run there when it was a young house, playing at hide and seek with other houses, and forgotten its way out again. It was old enough now and dreary enough for no one lived in it but Scrooge. The other rooms were all being let out as offices. The yard was so dark that even Scrooge, who knew its every stone, was fain to grope with his hands. The fog and frost hung so about the black old gateway of the house that it seemed as if the genius of the weather sat in mournful meditation on the threshold. Now it is a fact that there was nothing at all peculiar about the knocker on the door, except that it was quite large. It is also a fact that Scrooge had seen it night and morning during his whole residence in the place. Oh my god, I'm weaving out of Irish into Southern, back into Irish, into fucking... oh god. Alright, those of you guys who know the story of the Christmas Carol, start brainstorming what voice to give the next person. Oh, fuck. Alright, let me start from the top of the sentence, because now I'm fucking tongue-tied. Now, it's a fact that there was nothing at all particular about the knocker on the door, except that it was very large. It is also a fact that Scrooge had seen it, night and morning, during his whole residence at the place, also that Scrooge had as little of what is called fancy about him as any man in the city of London, even including, which is a bold word, the corporation alderman in the library. Let it also be borne in mind that Scrooge had not bestowed one thought on Marley since his last mention in his 7 years dead... What the fuck? Dickens! Let it also be borne in mind that Scrooge had not bestowed one thought on Marley since his last mention of his 7 years dead partner that afternoon. There we go. And then, let any man explain to me if he can how it happened that Scrooge, having the key in the lock of the door, saw the knocker, without its undergoing any immediate process of change, not a knocker, but Marley's face. Marley's face? 'Twas not an impenetrable shadow as the other objects in the yard were, but it has a dismal light about it, like a bad lobster in the dark cellar. 'Twas not angry or ferocious, but it looked at Scrooge as Marley used to look, with ghostly spectacles turned upon its ghostly forehead. The hair was curiously stirred, as if by breath or hot air, and although the eyes were wide open, they were perfectly motionless. That and its livid colour made it horrible, but its horror seemed to be in spite of the face and beyond control, rather than part of its own expression. As Scrooge looked fixedly at the phenomenon, it was the knocker again. To say that he was not startled, or that his blood was not conscious of the terrible sensation which had been a stranger from infancy, would be untrue. But he put his hand upon the key he relinquished, turned it sturdily, walked in and lighted his candle. He did pause with a moment's irresolution before he shut the door, and he did look cautiously behind it at first, as if he half expected to be terrified with the sight of Marley's pigtails sticking out into the hall. But there was nothing on the back of the door except the screws and nuts that held the knocker on, and so he said, "Pooh, pooh," and closed it with a bang. The sound resounded through the house like thunder. Every room above, every cask in the wine merchant cellars below, appeared to have a separate peal of echoes on its own. Scrooge was not a man to be frightened by echoes. He fastened the door and walked across the hall and up the stairs slowly too, trimming his candle as he went. You may talk vaguely about driving a coach and six up a good old flight of stairs, or through a bad young Act of Parliament, but I mean to say you might have got a hearse up that staircase and taken it broadwise, with the splinter bar toward the wall and the door towards the balustrades, and done it easy. There was plenty of width for that, and room to spare, which Perhaps the reason why Scrooge thought he saw a locomotive hearse going on before him in the gloom. Half a dozen gas lamps out on the street wouldn't have lighted the entry too well. So you may suppose it was pretty dark with Scrooge's step. Up Scrooge went, not caring a button for that. Darkness is cheap, and Scrooge liked it. But before he shut his heavy door, he walked through the rooms to see that it was all right. He just enough recollection of the face to desire to do that. Sitting room, bedroom, lumber room, all as they should be. Nobody under the table, nobody under the sofa. A small fire in the grate, spoon and basin ready, and a little saucepan of gruel. Scrooge had a cold in his head. Upon the hob. Nobody under the bed, nobody in the closet, nobody in the dressing gown, which was hanging up in a suspicious attitude against the wall. Lumber room as usual, old fire guards, old shoes, 2 fish baskets, washing stand on 3 legs and a poker. Quite satisfied, he closed the door and locked himself in. Double locked himself in, which was not his custom. Thus secured against surprise, he took off his cravat. Cravat? I have no fucking idea what that word is. Put on his dressing gown and slippers, and his nightcap, and sat down before the fire to take his gruel. 'Twas a low fire indeed. Nothing on such a bitter night. He was obliged to sit close to it and brood over it before he could extract the least sensation of warmth from such a handful of fuel. The fireplace was an old one built by some Dutch merchant long ago, and paved all round with quaint Dutch tiles designed to illustrate the scriptures. There were the Cains and the Abels, Pharaoh's daughters, the Queen of Sheba, angelic messengers descending through the air on clouds like feather beds. Not the horrific ones you could imagine. Abraham's, Belshazzar's, apostles running off to sea in butter boats, hundreds of figures to attract his thoughts, and yet the face of Marley, 7 years dead, came upon the ancient prophet's rod and swallowed up the whole. If each smooth tile had been a blank at first, the power to shape some picture on its surface of the disjointed fragments of the thoughts, there would have been a copy of old Marley's head on every one.
Humbug,
said Scrooge, and walked across the room. After several turns he sat down again. As he threw his head back in the chair, his glance happened to rest upon a bell. A disused bell that hung in his room and communicated for some purpose now forgotten chamber in the highest story of the building. 'Twas with great astonishment and with a strange inexplicable dread that he looked, and he saw this bell began to swing. It swung so softly that in the outset it scarcely made a sound. But soon it rang loudly, and so did every bell in the house. This may have lasted a half minute or a minute, but it seemed like an hour. The bells ceased as they began, together. They were succeeded by a clanking noise, deep down below, as if some person were dragging a heavy chain over the casks in the wine merchant's cellar. Scrooge then remembered to have heard that ghosts in haunted houses were described as dragging chains. The cellar door flew open with a booming sound, and then he heard the noise much louder, on the floors below, coming up the stairs, coming straight towards his door.
It's humbug still,
said Scrooge.
I won't believe it.
His colour changed, though. When without a pause it came upon through the heavy door and passed into the room before his eyes. Upon its coming in, the dying flame leaped up, as though it cried. Upon its coming in, the dying flame leaped up, as though it cried,
I know him! Marley's ghost!
And fell again. Alright, I guess Ren is voicing the fire, too.
Hee hee.
Okay. God damn it, stop! What nerve are you nibbling on to give me the giggles? I don't understand. Ugh. The same face, the very same. Marley in his pigtail, usual waistcoat, tights and boots, and the tassels on the latter bristling like his pigtail, and coat skirts and the hair upon his head. The chain he drew was clasped about his middle. It was long and wound about him like a tail, and it was made, for Scrooge observed it closely, of cash boxes, keys, padlocks, letters, deeds, and heavy purses wrought in steel. His body was transparent, so that Scrooge, observing him, and looking through his waistcoat, could see 2 buttons on his coat behind. Scrooge had often heard it said that Marley had no bowels, but he never believed it until now. No, nor did he believe it even now, though he looked at the phantom through and through, and saw it standing there before him, though he felt the chilling influence of his death-cold eyes, and marked with the very texture of the folded handkerchief bound about his head and chin, which wrapper he had not observed before. He was still incredulous and fought against his senses.
"How now?"
said Scrooge, caustic and cold as ever.
"What do you want with me?"
Oh God, what voice are we giving Marley? Just shout it out, chat. Do-do-do, 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 you do-do-do, what-do-do, la-da-da-da. I'm just gonna play like menu music until some of you say something. La-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da. Yeah, da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da. Da-na-na-na-na, da-da-da-da-da-da, you da-da-da-da-da, you da-da-da-da-da, you da-da-da-da-da, you da-da-da-da-da, you do-do-do-do-do, you do-do-do-do-do. Italian? Alright, you got it. Sorry, hold on, Oxy message, and I don't know if it's serious. Everyone knows that, like, when Oxy messages me, the whole world goes on pause. Alright, we might have a ghost. Yeah, I'm just worried about Oxy because she's going on a trip, and I don't know, I care about people. Alright, so Italian, pasta, pizza. Come on. Stop being a New Yorker, right? Put out for like 2 seconds, man. Italian. Much. Molly's voice, no doubt about it.
"Who are you?"
Ask me who I was.
"Who were you then?"
said Scrooge, raising his voice.
"You're particular for a shade."
He was going to say to a shade, but substituted this as more appropriate. In life, I was your partner. Oh God, we're back to being a New Yorker. Oh fuck, what do Italians sound like? All of the Italians I know are New Yorkers. It's me, Mario. Okay, he's just gonna be Mario. Okay. In life, I was your partner. God damn it, I'm New York again. In life, I was your partner, Jacob Marley. What is this accent? Oh God, Zerp, I'm sorry. Come on. Be Mario. Do 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 do. Come on. You can do this. Oh, why is it? It's so close to being a New Yorker in my brain. Goddamn. Oh God. All right, we'll try this again. In life, I was your partner, Jacob Marley. Do 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 do.
Can you sit down?
Asked Scrooge, looking doubtfully at him. I can.
Do it then.
Oh. Scrooge asked the question because he didn't know whether a ghost so transparent might find himself in a condition to take a chair, and felt that in the event of it being impossible, it might involve the necessity of an embarrassing explanation. But the ghost sat down on the opposite side of the fireplace as if he was quite used to it. You don't believe in me? Do, observed the ghost.
I don't,
said Scrooge. What evidence would you have of my reality beyond that of your senses? Do. Why was this the solution? Why was this the solution I came up with? Doing the Mario dying music doesn't cover up that this accent is bad. It just accentuates it. Oh, at least it's funny. Yeah. What evidence would you have of my reality beyond that of your senses?
I don't know,
said Scrooge. Why do you doubt your senses? Why do you doubt your senses? Oh my God, I don't listen to enough Italians.
Because, said Scrooge, a little thing affects them. A slight disorder of the stomach makes them cheats. You might be an undigested bit of beef, a blot of mustard, a crumb of cheese, a fragment of an underdone potato. God forbid. There's more of gravy than of grave about you, whatever you are.
Scrooge was not much in the habit of cracking jokes, nor did he feel in his heart by any means waggish then. Truth is that he tried to be smart as a means of distracting his own attention and keeping down his terror, for the spectre's voice disturbed the very marrow of his bones. To sit staring at those fixed glazed eyes in the silence for a moment would play, Scrooge felt, the very deuce with him. It was something very awful, too, in the spectre's being provided with an infernal atmosphere of his own. Scrooge could not feel it himself, but this was clearly the case. Though the ghost sat perfectly motionless, its hair, skirts, and tassels were still agitated by the hot vapour from an oven.
You see this toothpick?
Said Scrooge, returning quickly to the charge, for the reason just assigned, and wishing, though it were for only a sentence, to divert the vision's stony gaze from himself. I do, replied the ghost.
You're not looking at it.
But I see it. But I see it, said the ghost, notwithstanding. Do.
Well, returned Scrooge, I have but to swallow this, and be for the rest of my days persecuted by a legion of goblins, all my own creation. Humbug, I tell you. Humbug.
At this the spirit raised a frightful cry and shook its chain with such a dismal and appalling noise that Scrooge held tight to his chair to save himself from falling into a swoon. But how much greater was his terror when the phantom, taking off the bandage round his head, as if it were too warm to wear indoors, its lower jaw dropped upon its breast. It dropped upon its... I am a weird mix of Southern and Irish at this point. I think I'm going to drop both. Scrooge fell upon his knees and clasped his hands before his face. And the Irish is back.
Mercy,
he said.
Dreadful apparition, why do you trouble me?
Man of the worldly mind, replied the ghost. Do you believe in me or not? Okay, that's a little better.
I do, said Scrooge. I must. But why do spirits walk the earth, and why do they come to me?
It is required of every man, the ghost returned, that the spirit within him should walk among his fellow men, and travel far and wide, and... Oh my God, the hiccups. Oh my Lord. Travel far and wide, and if that spirit goes not forth in life, it is condemned to do so after death. It is doomed to wander through the world. Oh, woe is me! And witness what it cannot share, but might have shared on earth, and turned to happiness. Do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do. Again the spectre raised a cry, and shook his chain and wrung his shadowy hands.
You're fettered, said the Scrooge, trembling. Tell me, why?
I wear the chain I forged in life, replied the ghost. I made it link by link and yard by yard. I girded it of my own free will, and of my own free will I wore it. Is its pattern strange to you? Do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do. I'm so sorry, chat. I am so sorry. Oh no. Ugh. Oh. Scrooge trembled more and more. Or would you know, pursued the ghost, that the weight and chain of the strong coil you bear yourself? It was as heavy and as long as this several Christmas Eves ago. You have labored on it since. It is a ponderous chain. Do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do. Scrooge glanced about himself on the floor, in the expectation of finding himself surrounded by 50 or 60 fathoms of iron cable. But he could say nothing.
Jacob, he said imploringly. Oh, Jacob Marley, tell me more. Speak comfort to me, Jacob.
I have none to give, the ghost replied. Apparently I'm Dracula now? It comes from other regions. Ebenezer Scrooge. I am not... No, we're not Russian. Mario. It's me, Mario. Come on, you can do this. Ah. I'm not going to complain. Lightheartedness is nice. Yo, Sassy. This whole stream has been me failing at accents and getting the giggle bunnies. It's awful. These story streams just get worse. They don't get better. They just get worse. They just dissolve into me being stupid. Oh boy. Oh my God. Okay. Well, we'll just feed the bunnies carrots to keep them around. Oh, honey, they don't even need carrots. Oh, they will eat your soul if they have to. Oh, my Lord. Alright, come on. Italian. It's me, Mario. Come on, you can do this. I have none to give. That's Russian, idiot. That's a Russian Italian. Oh, Lord in heaven. We'll take it. I have none to give. There we go. The ghost replied. It comes from other regions, Ebenezer Scrooge. And it's Ebenezer Scrooge. How do I say that not in Russian? Come on, man. Ebenezer Scrooge. No, that's still Russian. Why am I Russian? Nobody called for Russian. Oh, no. Okay, I just gotta skip his name. And is conveyed by other ministers to other kinds of men, nor can I tell you what I would. A very little more is all permitted of me. I cannot rest, I cannot stay, I cannot linger anywhere. My spirit never walked by other counting-house mock me. In my life my spirit never roved beyond the narrow limits of our money-changing hole, and a weary journey lies before me. Do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do. It was a habit with Scrooge, whenever he became thoughtful, to put his hands in his breeches pockets, pondering on what the ghost had said. He did so now, but without lifting up his eyes or getting off his knees.
"You must have been very slow about it, Jacob,"
Scrooge observed, in a businesslike manner, although with humility and deference. "Slow?" the ghost repeated.
7 years dead,
mused Scrooge.
and travelling all the time.
"The whole time," said the ghost. "No rest, no peace, incessant torture, remorse."
"It travelled fast,"
said Scrooge. "On the wings of the wind," replied the ghost.
"You might have gone over a great quantity of grounds in 7 years,"
said Scrooge. The ghost, on hearing this, set up another cry, and clanked its chains so hideously that the dead silence of the night, that Ward would have been justified in indicting it for a nuisance. And Super Mario Brothers filed a complaint on copyright infringement. "Oh, captive bound and double ironed," cried the phantom, "not to know the agents of incessant labor by immortal creatures, for this earth must pass into eternity before the good of it is susceptible to all that developed." I said maybe 2 of those words correctly. "Not to know any Christian spirit working kindly in its little sphere, wherever it may be, will find its mortal life too short for its vast means of usefulness. Not to know space of regret can make amends for one's life's opportunity misused. Yet such was I! Oh, such was I! Do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do.
"But you were always a good man of business, Jacob,"
faltered Scrooge, who now began to apply this to himself. "Business!" cried the ghost, wringing its hands again. "Mankind was my business. The common welfare was my business. Charity, mercy, forbearance, and benevolence were all my business. The dealings of my trade were but a drop of water in the comprehensive ocean of my business. Do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do." It held up its chain at arm's length, as if it were the cause of all of its unavailing grief, and flung it heavily upon the ground again. "At this time of the rolling year," the spectre said, "I suffer most. Why did I walk through clouds of... clouds? I meant to say crowds, but alright, we'll go with clouds. Why did I walk through crowds of fellow beings with my eyes turned down, and never raise them to the blessed star which led the wise men to a poor abode? Were there no poor homes to which its light would have conducted me? Do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do." Scrooge was very much dismayed to hear the spectre going on at this rate, and began to quake exceedingly. "Hear me!" cried the ghost. "My time is nearly gone." Do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do.
"I will," said Scrooge, "but don't be hard upon me. Don't be flowery, Jacob, pray."
"How is it that I appear before you in a shape that you can see? I may not tell. I have sat invisible beside you many and many a day. Do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do." It was not agreeable. No. I bid my lips and my tongue do my service for me, please. It was not an agreeable idea. Scrooge shivered and wiped his perspiration from his brow.
"That is no light of my penance."
Oh, fuck, that's the wrong voice. "It is no light above... Oh, fuck. It is no light part of my penance," pursued the ghost. "I am here tonight to warn you that you yet have a chance of escaping my fate. A chance and hope of my procuring Ebenezer. Do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do."
"You were always a good friend to me,"
said Scrooge.
"Thank you."
"You will be haunted," resumed the ghost, "by 3 spirits. Do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do." Scrooge's countenance fell almost as low as the ghost's had gone.
Is it chance and hope you mentioned, Jacob?"
he demanded in a faltering voice. "It is. Do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do.
I think I'd rather not, said Scrooge.
Without their visits, said the ghost, you cannot hope to shun the path I tread, except the first tomorrow, when the bell tolls 1. Do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do.
Couldn't I take 'em all at once and have it over, Jacob?
Hinted Scrooge. Except the night on the next night will be at the same hour, the third upon the next night when the last stroke of 12 has ceased to vibrate. Look and see me no more, and look at that, for your own sake. You remember what has passed between us. Do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do. When it had said those words, the spectre took its wrapper from the table and bound it round its head as before. Scrooge knew this by the smart sound its teeth made when the jaws were brought together by the bandage. He ventured to raise his head again, and found his supernatural visitor comforting him in an erect attitude, with its chain wound over about his arm. The apparition walked backward from him, and at every step it took, the window raised itself a little, so that when the spectre reached it, it was wide open. It beckoned Scrooge to approach, which he did. When they were within 2 paces of each other, Marley's ghost held up his hand, warning him to come no nearer. Scrooge stopped, not so much in obedience as in surprise and fear, for on the raising of the hand he became sensible of confused noises in the air, incoherent sounds of lamentation and regret, wailings of inexpressibly sorrow and self-accusatory. The spectre, after listening for a moment, joined in the mournful dirge, and floated out upon the bleak and dark night. Scrooge followed to the window, desperate in his curiosity. He looked out. The air was full of phantoms, wandering hither and thither in restless haste, moaning as they went. Every one of them wore chains like Marley's ghosts. Some few, like guilty governments, were linked together. None were free. Many had been personally known to Scrooge in their lives. He'd been quite familiar with one old ghost, in white waistcoat, with a monster's iron safe attached to its ankle, who cried piteously at being unable to assist a wretched woman with an infant, whom it saw below, upon a doorstep. The misery was with them. All was, clearly, that they sought to interfere for good in human matters, and lost the power forever. Whether these creatures faded into mist or mist enshrouded him, he could not tell. But they, as their spirit voices faded together, the night became as it had been when he walked home. Scrooge closed the window and examined the door by which the ghost had entered. It was double-locked. He had locked it with his own hands, and the bolts were undisturbed. He tried to say,
Humbug,
but stopped at the first syllable,
hum.
and baying, from the emotion that he had undergone, or the fatigues of the day, or his glimpse of the invisible world, or the dull conversation of the ghost, and the lateness of the hour, much in need of repose, went straight to bed, without undressing, and fell upon the instant. Holy crap. This is long as hell. Alright, chat. I'm gonna have you vote in the next 2 minutes. Do we continue Dickens' A Christmas Carol, or are you curious about other stories? I will let you choose. I can do either one. And I will let you decide in the time it takes for me to get some goddamn water. Because Mario beat the shit out of me. I'll BRB. In the meantime, enjoy the little moving pictures and discuss amongst thyselves my fate. Ugh. 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 Yeah, I should be back in like 2 minutes. I'm just gonna refill this thing. Do-do-do. Do-do-do-do-do-do. Okay, Chad, I lied. I'm actually bringing my laptop charger over here, and then I'm gonna get water. And then when I get back, tell me what to do. Oh my god. Thank you, Maud, whoever put the poll up. I see you. Thank you, Zerb. Alright, chat. I see 2 votes for continue. Good. Good. My chat is decisive. Alright, kids. You ready? Do 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 do. I could actually even change the, here we go. Or this. I could do that. It's also very pretty. Alright. Here we go. Oh, actually, that makes it hard to read the chat in the VOD, doesn't it? Oh no, you could still see it. Alright. Here we go. Stave 2. The first of the 3 spirits. When Scrooge awoke, 'twas so dark that, looking out of bed, he could scarcely distinguish the transparent window from the opaque walls of the chamber. He was endeavouring to pierce the darkness with his ferret eyes, when the chimes of the neighbourhood church struck the 4 quarters. So he listened for the hour. To his great astonishment, the Heavy bell went from 6 to 7 and from 7 to 8 and regularly up to 12 and then stopped. 12. 'Twas past 2 when he went to bed. The clock was wrong, and Icicle must have gotten to the works 12. He touched the spring of his repeater to correct this most preposterous clock. Its rapid little pulse beat 12 and stopped.
Why, it isn't possible, said Scrooge, that I can only have slept through a whole day and far into another night. It isn't possible that anything happened to the sun. And this is 12 noon.
The idea being an alarming one, he scrambled out of bed and groped his way to the window. He was obliged to rub the frost off his sleeve, his dressing gown, before he could say anything, and could see very little then. All he could make out was 'twas still very foggy and extremely cold, and there was no noise of people running to and fro, and making a great stir, as there unquestionably would have been if the night had beaten off the bright day and taken possession of the world. Oh, I should open this candle, actually. Immersion. It was a great relief, because 3 days after sight of the first exchange paid to Mr. Ebenezer Scrooge on his order and so forth would have been a mere United States security if there were no days to count by. What? What does that mean? Wait, this was a... Huh. No noise of people running to and fro making great stirs there unquestionably would have been if night had beaten off the bright day and taken possession of the world. This was a great relief, because 3 days after sight of his first exchange paid to Mr. Ebenezer Scrooge on his order, and so forth, would have been a mere United States security if there were no days to count by. What the fuck is a United States security? Hello? Should I be personally offended? Whatever. Scrooge went to bed again. Oh, right, chat. What accent do you want the next ghost to have? Scrooge went to bed again and thought over and over that he could make nothing of it. The more he thought, the more perplexed he was. The more he endeavoured not to think, and the more he thought, I know that feel. I know that feel very well. Marley's ghost bothered him exceedingly. Every time he resolved within himself Fucking hell. Marley's ghost bothered him exceedingly. Every time he resolved within himself, after a mature inquiry, that it was all a dream, his mind flew back again, like a strong spring released, to its first position, and presented the same problem to be worked all through. Was it a dream or not? Scrooge lay in this state until the chime had gone 3/4 more, when he remembered, on a sudden, that the ghost had warned him of a visitation when the bell tolled 1. He resolved to lie awake until the hour was past, and considering that he would no more go to sleep than go to heaven, this was perhaps the wisest resolution in his power. The quarter was so long that he was more than convinced he must have sunk into a doze unconsciously and missed the clock. At length it broke upon his listening ear. Dong dong. An exaggerated stereotypical ghost voice. You got it, sassy.
1/4 past,
said Scrooge, counting. Dong dong.
1/2 past,
said Scrooge. Dong dong.
1/4 to it,
said Scrooge. Dong dong.
the hour itself,
said Scrooge triumphantly.
and nothing else.
He spoke before the hour bell sounded, which it now did with a deep, hollow, melancholy 1. Light flashed upon the room in an instant, and the curtains of his bed were drawn. The curtains of his bed were drawn aside, I tell you, by a hand. Not the curtains at his feet, nor the curtains at his back, but to those which his face was addressed. The curtains of his bed were drawn aside, and Scrooge, starting up into a half-recumbent attitude, found himself safe with the unearthly visitor who drew them. As close to it as I am to you now, and I am standing in the spirit at your elbow. 'Twas a strange figure, like a child, yet not so much like a child like an old man, viewed through some supernatural medium, which gave him the appearance of having receded from the view, and being diminished to a child's proportions. Its hair, which hung about its neck and down its back, was the white, as if with age, and yet the face had not a wrinkle in it, and the tenderest bloom was on the skin. The arms were very long and muscular, the hands the same, as if its hold were of an uncommon strength. His legs and feet, most delicately formed, were, like those of upper members, bare, wore the tunic of the purest white, and round its waist was bound a lustrous belt, the sheen of which was beautiful. It held a branch of fresh green holly in its hand, and, in a singular contradiction of that wintry album, had its dress trimmed with summer flowers. But the strangest thing about it was, the crown of its head was there sprung a bright, clear jet of light, by which all this was visible, which was doubtless the occasion of its using, in stiller moments, a great extinguisher for a cap, which it now held under its arm. Even this, though when Scrooge looked at it with increasing steadiness, 'twas not his strangest quality, for as its belt sparkled and glittered now in one part and another, and what was light one instant at another time was dark, so the figure itself fluctuated in its distinctness, being now a thing with one arm, now with one leg, now with 20 legs, now a pair of legs without a head, now a head without a body, of which dissolving parts no outline would be visible in the dense gloom, wherein they melted away. And at the very wonder of this, 'twould be itself again, distinct and clear as ever.
Are you the spirit, sir, whose coming was foretold to me?
Asked Scrooge.
I am.
I almost did do, but that bit's over, thankfully. The voice was soft and gentle, singularly low, as if being so close beside him it were at a distance.
Who and what are you?
Scrooge demanded.
I am the ghost of Christmas past.
Long past?
Inquired Scrooge, observant of its dwarfish nature.
No, your past.
Bringing out the old opera. All my singing coaches would fucking cringe. That's a ghost of past, alright. Perhaps Scrooge could have not told anybody why, if anyone could have asked him. But he had a special desire to see the spirit in its cap, and begged him to be covered.
What?
Exclaimed the ghost.
Would you so soon put out with worldly hands the light I give? It is not enough that you are those whose passions made this cap, and force me through whole trains of years to wear it low upon my brow.
I don't know why I find this so funny. It's not funny. It is funny. Scrooge reverently disclaimed all intention to offend or any knowledge upon having wilfully bonneted the spirit at any period of his life. He then made bold to inquire what business brought him there.
Your welfare,
said the ghost. Scrooge expressed himself much obliged, but could not help thinking that a night of unbroken rest would have been more conducive to that end. The spirit must have heard him thinking, for it said immediately,
your reclamation, then. Take heed.
It put out its long, strong hand as it spoke, and clasped him gently by the arm.
Rise and walk with me.
'Twould have been in vain for Scrooge to plead that the weather and the hour were not adapted to pedestrian purposes, that the bed was warm, and the thermometer was a long way below freezing. But he was clad lightly in his slippers, dressing gown, and a nightcap, and that he was cold upon him at the time. The grasp, though gentle as a woman's hand, was not to be resisted. He rose, but finding the spirit made toward the window, clasped his robe in supplication.
I'm mortal,
Scrooge remonstrated.
and liable to fall.
Bear but a touch of my hand there,
said the spirit, laying upon its heart,
and you shall be upheld in more than this.
As the words were spoken, they passed through the wall, and stood upon an old country road. Country roads, take me home. Sorry. With fields on either hand. The city had entirely vanished. Not a vestige of what it was to be seen. The darkness and the mist had vanished with it, for it was a cold, clear winter day, and the snow upon the ground.
Good heaven,
said Scrooge, clasping his hands together, as he looked about him.
there's bread in this place. I was a boy here.
The spirit gazed upon him mildly. Its gentle touch, though it had been light and instantaneous, appeared still present to the old man's sense of feeling. It was conscious of 1,000 open odours. Hello? It was conscious of 1,000 odours floating in the air, each one of them connected with 1,000 thoughts and hopes and joys and cares long, long forgotten.
Your lip is trembling,
said the ghost.
and what is upon your cheek?
Scrooge muttered with an unusual catching in his voice that it was a pimple, and begged the ghost to lead him where he would.
You recollect the way?
Inquired the spirit.
Remember it,
Cried Scrooge with fervour.
I could walk it blindfolded.
Strange to have forgotten it for so many years,
observed the ghost.
Let us go on.
They watched. Jesus Christ, Wolfie. They walked along the road, Scrooge recognising every gate and post and tree, until a little market town appeared in the distance, with its bridge, its church, and winding river. Some shaggy ponies now were seen trotting toward them with boys upon their backs, who called other boys in country gigs and carts driven by farmers. All these boys were in great spirits and shouted to each other until the broad fields were so full of merry music. The crisp air laughed to hear it.
These are but shadows of things that have been,
said the ghost.
They have no consciousness of us.
The jocund travellers came on, and as they came, Scrooge knew, and named every one of them. Why was he rejoiced beyond all bounds to see them? Why did his cold eye glisten and his heart leap up as they went past? Why was he filled with gladness when he heard them give each other Merry Christmas, and they parted across roads and byways for their several homes? What was a Merry Christmas to Scrooge? Out upon Merry Christmas. What good had it ever done him?
The school is not quite deserted,
said the ghost.
A solitary child, neglected by his friends, is left there still.
Scrooge said he knew it, and he sobbed. They left the high road by a well-remembered lane, and soon approached at a mansion full of dull red brick, with a little weathercock-surmounted cupola on the roof and a bell hanging on it. 'Twas a large house, but one of broken fortunes. The spacious offices were little used, and their walls were damp and mossy, and their windows broken, and the gates decayed. Fowls clucked and strutted in the stables, and coach-houses and sheds were overrun with grass. Nor was it more retentive of its ancient state within, for entering the dreary hall, and glancing through the open doors of many rooms, they found them poorly furnished, cold and vast. There was an earthly savour in the air, chilly bareness in the place, which associated itself somehow with too much getting up by candlelight, and not too much to eat. They went, the ghost and Scrooge, across the hall, to a door at the back of the house. It opened before them, and disclosed a long, bare, melancholy room, lay bare still by lines of plain dale forms and chicks. At one of these lonely... Sorry, I looked over in consternation because I thought my laptop wasn't charging. It is. Okay. At one of these, a lonely boy was reading near a feeble fire, and Scrooge sat down upon a form and wept to see his forgotten self, as they used to be. Not a latent echo in the house, not a squeak and scuffle from the mice behind the panelling, not a drip from the half-thawed water spout in the dull yard beyond. Not a sigh among the leafless boughs of one despondent poplar, not the idle swinging of an empty storehouse door, no, not a clicking in the fire, but fell upon the heart of Scrooge with a softening influence, gave a freer passage to his tears. The spirit touched him on the arm and pointed to his younger self, intent on his reading. Suddenly a man in foreign garments, wonderfully real and distinct to look at, stood outside the window with an axe stuck in his belt, and leading by the bridle an ass laden with wood.
"Why, it's Ali Baba!"
Scrooge exclaimed in ecstasy.
"It's dear old honest Ali Baba. Yes, I know. One Christmas time, when yonder solitary child was left here all alone, he did come for the first time, just like that. Poor boy, and Valentine," said Scrooge, "and his wild brother Orson. There they go. And what's his name, who was put down in his drawers asleep at the end of the gate of Damascus? Don't you see him? And the Sultan's groom turned upside down by the genie. There pieces upon his head. Serve him right. I'm glad of it. What business had he to be married to the princess?"
To hear Scrooge expending all the earnestness of his nature to such subjects. I'm still southern, what the fuck? To hear Scrooge expending on all the eagerness, oh my lord. To hear Scrooge expending on all of the earnestness of his nature on such subjects in a most extraordinary voice between laughing and crying, to see his heightened and excited... I'm still fucking southern. To see his heightened and excited face would have been a surprise to his business friends in the city indeed. There we go.
"There's the parrot,"
cried Scrooge.
"Green body and yellow tail, with a thing like lettuce growing out of the top of his head. There he is, poor Robin Crusoe, he called him, when he came home after sailing around the island. Poor Robin Crusoe. Where you been, Robin Crusoe?" The man thought he was dreaming, but he wasn't. He was a parrot, you know. There goes Friday running to his life in the little creek. Oh, hoop, hello.
Then, with the rapidity of transition very foreign to his usual character, he said, in pity of his formal self,
"Poor boy,"
and cried again.
"I wish,"
Scrooge muttered, putting his hand in his pocket, looking about him, after drying his eyes with his cuff.
"But it's too late now."
"What's the matter?"
asked the spirit.
"Nothing,"
said Scrooge.
"Nothing. This boy singing a Christmas carol at my door last night. I should like to have given him something, that's all."
The ghost smiled thoughtfully and waved his hand, saying as it did so,
"Let us see another Christmas."
Scrooge's former self grew larger at the words, and the room became a little darker and more dirty. The panels shrunk and the windows cracked. Fragments of plaster fell out of the ceiling, and the naked laths were shown instead. But how this was all brought about, Scrooge knew no more than you do. He only knew that it was quite correct. Everything had happened so, and there he was alone again, and all the boys had gone home for the jolly holidays. He was not reading now, but walking up and down despairingly. Scrooge looked at the ghost with a mournful shaking of his head, glanced anxiously toward the door. It opened, and a little girl, much younger than the boy, came darting in, and put her arms around his neck, and often kissing him, addressed him as her dear, dear brother. Alright, chat. Voice for the child. Voice for the little girl. Gives me an excuse to drink some fucking water. No! The straw! It fails me! How dare this happen to me? How could this happen to me? I made my mistakes. Southern? Alright, I could do Southern. I've been trying not to do Southern this whole fucking time. Alright, give me a second to fix my poor unfortunate straw. In need, in pain. Maybe this'll stick. Maybe it's Maybelline. You know, I bet you do. I've come to bring you home, dear brother, said the child, clapping her tiny hands and bending down to laugh. To bring you home, home, home.
Home?
Oh, fuck. This is younger him. How do I do younger Scrooge? I have no idea. Less old. Thank you.
Home, little fan?
Returned the boy. Yes, yes, said the child. Fuck me. Yes, said the child, brimful of glee. Home, home, for good and all. Home forever and ever. Father is so much kinder than he used to be, and the home's like heaven. He spoke so gently to me one dear night when I was coming to bed that I was not afraid to ask him once more if you might come home. And he said, yes, you should, and sent me in a coach to bring you. And you're to be a man, said the child, opening her eyes. And you are never to come back here, but first we'll be together all Christmas long, have the merriest time in the world.
You are quite a woman, little fan,
exclaimed the boy. She clapped her hands and laughed, and tried to touch his head, but being too little, laughed again and stood on tiptoe to embrace him. And she began to drag him in her childish eagerness toward the door, and he, nothing loth to go, accompanied her. A terrible voice in the hall cried, oh fuck. A terrible voice. What's the terrible voice? Oh, I got it. Bring down Master Scrooge's box there. And in the hall appeared the schoolmaster himself, who glared Master Scrooge with a ferocious condensation, and threw him into a dreadful state of mind by shaking hands with him. He then conveyed to him and his sister in the veriest old well of a shivering best parlour that ever was seen, where the maps upon the wall and the celestial and terrestrial globes of the windows were waxy with cold. He produced a decanter of curiously light wine, and a block of curiously heavy cake, and administered instalments of those dainties to the younger people, and at the same time sending out a meagre servant to offer a glass of something to the postboy, who answered that he thanked the gentleman, but if it were not for the same tap as he tasted before, he'd rather not. Master Scrooge's trunk being by this time tied on top of the chaise, wow, fucking Dickens. The children what the fuck? The children bade the schoolmaster goodbye right willingly, and getting to it, drove gaily down the garden sweep, the quick wheels dashing in the hoar-frost and snow from off the dark leaves of the evergreens like spray.
Always a delicate creature, whom a breath might have withered, said the ghost. But she had a large heart.
So she had,
cried Scrooge.
You're right. I will not gainsay it. Spirit, God forbid.
She died a woman, said the ghost, and had, as I think, children.
One child,
Scrooge returned.
True, said the ghost. Your nephew.
Scrooge seemed uneasy in his mind, and answered briefly.
Yes.
Although they had, but for that moment, left the school behind them, they were now in the busy thoroughfares of the city, where shadowy passengers passed and repassed, where shadowy carts and coaches battled for the way, and all strife and tumult of a city were. It was plain enough, by the dressing of the shops, that here too it was Christmas time again. But it was evening, and the streets were lighted up. The ghost stopped at a certain warehouse door and asked Scrooge if he knew it.
Know it,
Said Scrooge.
I was apprenticed here.
They went in. At a sight of an old gentleman in a Welsh wig, sitting behind such a large desk that he'd been 2 inches taller, he might have knocked his head upon the ceiling. Scrooge cried in great excitement.
Why, it's old Fezziwig. Bless his heart, Fezziwig alive again.
Old Fezziwig laid down his pen and looked up at the clock which pointed to the hour of 7. He rubbed his hands, adjusted his capacious waistcoat, laughed all over himself from his shoes to his organ of benevolence, and called out in a comfortable, oily, rich, fat, jovial voice, Yo there, Ebenezer, Dick! Oh no. Scrooge's former self, now grown a young man, came briskly in, accompanied by his fellow apprentice. Dick Wilkins to be oh, fuck,
Dick Wilkins, to be sure,
said Scrooge to the ghost.
Bless me, yes. There it is. He was much attached to me, was Dick. Poor Dick. Dear, dear.
Yo-ho, my boys, said Fezziwig. No more work tonight. Christmas Eve, Dick. Christmas, Ebenezer. Let's have the shutters up, cried old Fezziwig from a sharp clap of his hands, before a man can say Jack Robinson. You would not believe how these two fellows went at it. They charged into the street with shutters 1, 2, 3, and had 'em up in their places 4, 5, 6, barred them and pinned them 7, 8, 9, and came back before you've got to 12, panting like racehorses. Yelly-ho! Cried old Fezziwig, skipping down from the high desk with wonderful agility. Clear away, my lads. Let's have lots of room here. Yelly-ho, Dick! Cheer up, Ebenezer! Clear away. There was nothing they wouldn't have cleared away, or they couldn't have cleared away, with old Fezziwig looking on. 'Twas done in a minute. Every movable was packed off as if it were dismissed from public life for evermore. The floor was swept and watered. The lamps were trimmed, fuel were heaped upon the fire, and warehouse was snug and warm and dry, and bright a ballroom, as you desired to see upon a winter's night. In came a fiddler with music book, and went up the lofty desk and made an orchestra of it, and turned like 50 stomach aches. Oh! In came Miss Fezziwig. Oh Lord, that voice. One vast substantial smile. In came 3 Miss Fezziwigs. Oh no. Beaming and lovable. In came 6 young followers whose hearts they broke. In came all the young men and women employed in the business. In came the housemaid with her cousin, the baker. In came the cook with her brother's particular friend, the milkman. In came the boy from over the way who was suspected of not having board enough from his master, trying to hide himself behind the girl from the next door but one, who was proved to have her ears pulled by her mistress. In they all came, one after another, some shyly, some boldly, some gracefully, some awkwardly, some pushing, some pulling. In they came, anyhow and everyhow. Away they all went. 20 couples at once, hands half round and back the other way, down in the middle and up again, round and round in various stages of affectionate grouping. Old top couple always turning up in the wrong place, new couple starting off again, and as soon as they got there, old top couples at last, not a bottom one to help them. When this result was brought about, old Fezziwig, clapping his hands to stop the dance, cried out, "Well done!" And the fiddler plunged his hot face into a pot of porter, especially provided for that purpose. But scoring rest upon his reappearance, he instantly began again, though there were no dancers yet, as if the other fiddler had been carried home exhausted on a shutter, and he were a brand new man, resolved to beat him out of sight or perish. There were more dances, and there were more forfeits, more dances, and there were cake, there was negus, there was a great piece of cold roast, and there was a great piece of cold boiled, and there were mince pies and plenty of beer. But the great effect of the evening came after the roast and boiled, when the fiddler, an artful dog mind, the sort of man who knew his business better than you and I could have told him, struck up Sir Roger de Coverley. Then old Fezziwig stood out to dance with Mrs. Fezziwig, rather. Top couple too, a good stiff piece of work cut out for them. 3 or 4 or 20 pairs of partners, people who were not to be trifled with, people a dance, had no notion of walking. But if there had been twice as many, 4 times, old Fezziwig would have been a match for them, and so would Mrs. Fezziwig. As to her, she was worthy of being a partner in every sense of the term. If that's not high praise, tell me higher and I'll use it. Positive light appeared to issue from the Fezziwig's calves. They shone in every part of the dance like moons. Couldn't have predicted in any time what would have become of them next. When old Fezziwig and Miss Fezziwig had gone through the dance, advance and retire, both hands to your partner, bow and curtsy, corkscrew, thread the needle and back to your place, Fezziwig cut so deftly that he appeared to wink with his legs, came upon his feet again without a stagger. When the clock struck 11, the domestic ball broke up. Mr. and Mrs. Fezziwig took their stations on either side of the door, and shaking hands with every person individually as he or she went out, wished him or her a Merry Christmas. When everyone had retired but the 2 prentices, it lasted the same to them, and thus the cheerful voices died away, and the lads were left to their beds, which were under a counter in the back shop. During the whole of this time, Scrooge had acted like a man out of his wits. His heart and soul were in the scene, with his former self, corroborated everything, remembered everything, enjoyed everything, and underwent the strangest agitation. 'Twas not till now, when the bright faces of his former self and Dick were turned from them, that he remembered the ghost, and became conscious that it was looking full upon him, while the light on its head burnt very clear.
"A small matter," said the ghost, "to make these silly folk so full of gratitude."
"Small,"
echoed Scrooge. The spirit signed to him to listen to the 2 apprentices who were pouring out their hearts in praise of Fezziwig, and when he done so, said,
"Why is it not blank? He spent but a few pounds of your mortal money, 3 or 4 perhaps. Is that so much that he deserves this praise?"
"It isn't that,"
said Scrooge, heated by the remark, and speaking unconsciously like his former, not his latter self.
"Isn't that, spirit? He has the power to render us happy or unhappy, to make our service light or burdensome, pleasure or toil. They say his power is lies in words and looks, and things so slight and insignificant that it is impossible to add and count them up. What then? Happiness it gives is quite as great as if it cost a fortune."
He felt the spirit's glance, and stopped.
"What is the matter?"
asked the ghost.
"Nothing in particular,"
said Scrooge.
"Something, I think,"
the ghost insisted.
"No,"
said Scrooge.
"No, I should like to be able to say a word or 2 to my clerk just now, that's all."
His former self turned to the lamps as he gave utterance to wish. and Scrooge and the ghost again stood side by side in the open air.
My time grows short,
observed the spirit.
Quick.
'Twas not addressed to Scrooge, or anyone he could see, but it produced an immediate effect. For again Scrooge saw himself. He was older now, a man in the prime of his life. His face had not the harsh and rigid lines of later years, but it had begun to wear the signs of care and avarice. There was an eager, greedy, restless motion in the eye, which showed the passion that had taken root, and where the shadow of the growing tree would fall. 'Twas not alone, but by his side a fair young girl in a mourning dress, whose eyes fell tears, which sparkled in the light that shone out of the ghost of Christmas past. How should I do her voice? Should I make her British? British? Sweet. Oh, fuck. In wiping my glasses, I made them dirtier. God damn it. It matters little, said she softly. To you very little. Another idol has displaced me, and if it can cheer and comfort you in time to come, I would have tried to. Ah, that's Irish again, god damn it. To you very little. Another idol has displaced me, and if it can cheer you and comfort you in time to come, as I would have tried to, I have no just cause to grieve.
What idol has displaced you?
He rejoined. A golden one.
This is the even-handed dealing of the world,
he said.
There is no nothing on which it is so hard as poverty. There is nothing it professes to condemn with such severity as the pursuit of wealth.
You fear the world too much, she answered gently. All your other hopes have merged into the hope of being beyond the chance of this sordid reproach. I've seen your nobler aspirations fall off one by one until the master passion gain engrosses you. Have I not?
What then?
He retorted.
Even I have grown so much wiser. What then? I'm not changed toward you.
She shook her head. Am I? Oh wait.
Am I?
Our contract is an old one. 'Twas made when we were both poor and content to be so, until in good season we could improve our worldly fortune by our patient industry. You are changed. When it was made, you were another man.
I was a boy,
he said impatiently. Your own feeling tells you that you are not what you are, she returned. I am. That which promised happiness when we were one in heart is fraught with misery now that we are two. How often and how keenly I have thought of this, I will not say. It is enough that I have thought it, and can release you.
Have I ever sought release?
In words, no, never.
In what then?
In a changed nature, in an altered spirit, in another atmosphere of life, another hope at its great end, in everything that you made my love of any worth or value in your sight. If this had never been between us, said the girl, looking mildly but with steadiness upon him, tell me, would you seek me out and try to murder me now? Ah, no. He seemed to yield to the justice of the supposition in spite of himself, but he said with a struggle,
You think not?
I would gladly think otherwise if I could, she answered. Heaven knows. What I have learned, a truth like this, I know how strong and irresistible it must be. But if you were free today, tomorrow, yesterday, can I even believe that you would choose a dowerless girl? You who, in your very confidence with her, weigh everything by gain, or choosing her, if for a moment you are false enough to one guiding principle to do so. Do I not know that your repentance and regret would surely follow? I do. And I release you, with a full heart, for the love of him you once were. He was about to speak, but with her head turned to him, she resumed. You may. The memory of what is past makes me hope you will have pain in this. A very, very brief time. And you will dismiss the recollection of it, gladly, as an unprofitable dream, for which has happened. Well that you woke. May you be happy in the life you have chosen. She left him, and they parted.
Spirit,
Said Scrooge.
show me no more. Conduct me home. Why do you delight to torture me?
One shadow more, exclaimed the ghost.
No more,
Cried Scrooge.
no more, I do not wish to see it. Show me no more.
But the relentless ghost pinioned him in both his arms and forced him to observe what happened next. They were in another scene and place. A room, not very large or handsome, but full of comfort. Near to the winter fire sat a beautiful young girl, so like the last that Scrooge believed it was the same until he saw her, now a comely matron, sitting opposite her daughter. The noise in this room was perfectly tumultuous, for there were more children there than Scrooge in his agitated state of mind could count, and unlike the celebrated herd in the poem, they were not 40 children conducting themselves like one, but every child conducting himself like 40. The consequences were uproarious beyond belief, but no one seemed to care. On the contrary, mother and daughter laughed heartily and enjoyed it very much, and the latter, soon beginning to mingle in the sports, got pillaged by the young brigands most ruthlessly. What would I not have given to one of them? Though I could never have been so rude, no. I wouldn't for the wealth in all the world have crushed that braided hair and torn it down. For the precious little shoe I wouldn't have plucked it off. God bless my soul to save my life. And measuring her waist in sport, as I did, bold young brood, I couldn't have done it. I should have expected my arm to have grown round it for punishment, and never come straight again. And yet I should have dearly liked, I own, to have touched her lips, to have questioned her, that she might have opened them, to have looked upon the lashes of her downcast eyes, and never raised a blush, to have let loose waves of hair, an inch of which would have been keepsake beyond price. In short, I should have liked, I do confess, to have the lightest license of a child, and yet to have been a man enough to know its value. Wait. Squint? No one seemed to care. On the contrary, mother and daughter laughed heartily and enjoyed it very much, and really soon got pillaged by the young brigands most ruthlessly. Did bad shit happen? He talked himself in a big ass circle at the latter bit of that paragraph. I hope she's okay. I don't know. Thanks, Dickens. But now a knocking at the door was heard, and such a rush immediately ensured that she... Oh, with a laughing face and plundered dress. Yeah, she's fine. That she, with laughing face and plundered dress, was borne toward it, the centre of a flushed and boisterous group, just in time to greet the father, who came home attended by a man laden with Christmas toys and presents. Then the shouting and struggling, and the onslaught that was made on the defenceless porter, the scaling him with chairs and ladders to dive into his pockets to spoil him of brown paper parcels, hold on tight by his cravat, hung him round his neck, pummel his back, and kick his legs with irrepressible affection. The shouts of wonder and delight, with which the development of every package was received. The terrible announcement that the baby had been taken in the act of putting a doll's frying pan into his mouth, and was more suspected of having swallowed the fictitious turkey, glued on a wooden platter. The immense relief of finding this a false alarm. The joy and gratitude and ecstasy. Oh, everyone's fine. They're all indescribable alike. It's fine, it's just chaotic. Got it. It's enough that by degrees the children in their motions got out of the parlour, and by one stair at a time, to the top of the house, where they went to bed and so subsided. And now Scrooge looked on more attentively than ever, and the master of the house, having his daughter leaning fondly on him, sat down with her and her mother at his own fireside. And when he thought that such another creature, quite as graceful and as wonderful a promise, might have called him father, and been a springtime in the haggard winter of his life, his sight grew very dim indeed. Oh God, I gotta think. What do I make this man sound like? I'll just make him British too. Belle, said the husband, turning to his wife with a smile. I saw an old friend of yours this afternoon. Who was it? Guess. How can I? I don't know. She added in the same breath, laughing as she laughed. No, laughing as he laughed. Mr. Scrooge. Mr. Scrooge it was. I passed his office window. 'Twas not shut up. He had a candle inside, and I could scarcely help seeing him. Partner lies upon the point of death, I hear. And there he sat alone. Quite alone in the world, I believe. Spit, said Scrooge in a broken voice. Remove me from this place. I told you these were the shadows that things have been, said the ghost. They are what they are. Do not blame me. Remove me, Scrooge exclaimed. I can't bear it. He turned upon the ghost, and seeing that it looked upon him with a face which in some way there were fragments of all the faces he had shown him, bristled with it. Leave me. Take it back. Harm me no longer. And the struggle, if it can be called a struggle which the ghost had no visible resistance on his own part, was undisturbed by any effort of his adversary. Scrooge observed that its light was burning high and bright, and dimly connecting that with its influence over him. He seized the extinguisher cap, and by a sudden action pressed it upon its head. The spirit dropped beneath it, so that the extinguisher covered its whole form. But though Scrooge pressed it down with all its force, he could not hide the light, which streamed from under it in an unbroken flood upon the ground. He was conscious of being exhausted and overcome by an irresistible drowsiness, and further, of being in his own bedroom. He gave the cap a parting squeeze, in which his hand relaxed. He had barely time to reel to bed before he sank into a heavy sleep. Oh gods. Am I reading this whole thing tonight? How much is left of this? This is a whole novel. Holy gods, this is just chapter 3 and I'm still scrolling. Oh dude, there's no way I'm doing all of this tonight. If you guys really want me to, Christmas present, the future, and the ending. Yeah. Okay. I will attempt to do... It's a long one. We can always do a part 2 if you're up for it. I would love to. I should be able to do that tomorrow, even. I could pick this up tomorrow if you want. This is fun. I like this. And it appears like you're enjoying it, and I don't know. It's fun. So I will put a pin in that one. And I will pick it up I think I will pick it up tomorrow night. And I'll email myself to do exactly that. And then I will continue near a different day. You look forward to it for another day? Yeah, then I will definitely continue it, especially if you're enjoying it, Sassy. I know that I make it kind of jokey, and I get the giggle bunnies a lot. But I can tell that you're really enjoying it, and that makes it just easier to do. So yeah, nag me tomorrow. I'll email myself even as well. Christmas stream finish Dickens. I'll have that send tomorrow afternoon. Yeah, so we'll do that then. And I might sprinkle in some more stories as well. And I need to get back to Nier Automata at some point. As well as other games. But it's a crazy holiday week, and I bet I'll have more time to stream as it goes on. But thank you guys for hanging out. This was a blast, as always. I hope you guys had at least half as much fun as I did. If you guys didn't catch the beginning, you can always take a look at the VOD. I imagine that the VODs of these things are really fun to watch, just because half of it is me just losing my shit laughing. But as you can hear, I'm losing my voice. I've been streaming for 2.5 hours. So I might call it before I sound like a Scrooge permanently. But yeah, I hope you guys are having the best holiday season that you can be having, given your individual circumstances. And if I can make it a little better, that is a high honor. I know that it's a complicated time of year for a lot of people, and with great cheer comes a lot of introspection and a lot of complicated feelings. I know that some people in the community don't have basically suffered a lot of changes in the past year or along the courses of their lives that render the holiday season more complicated and nuanced and sometimes melancholy. And let's be real, seasonal depression's a thing too. And so if my broadcasting my stupid giggle bunny bullshit helps make that season just a bit brighter, then it's all worth it. And especially to my mods and to my VIPs, I'm super thankful for you guys just at a baseline. And I'll probably give a better thank you speech come later. I still have a spooky story New Year's stream to do after all. But yeah. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for enjoying my bullshit. We will pick this story up tomorrow. But in the meantime, do not eat or drink any questionable substances. Make smart decisions. Do not die. Dying is absolutely forbidden. And I will see all of you wonderful people at a later time. Take care, guys. And if any ghosts ask you for candy, just give them the candy. Trust me. It's better this way. Trust me. Do not deprive the ghosts of candy. It's not a good look.